God will provide. I'm making an assumption that most people in this room have had an experience of that being true. Am I right? Can you think of a time where God provided? I don't take for granted that I was raised in a home where that was not just the experience, but that was communicated. We would often have things or times, and it wasn't just resources. It might be the first thing we go to when we hear that God will provide. But I'm very grateful for the fact that I grew up in a house that named that God was the one who provided for us. And God provides in all sorts of ways. But it doesn't mean that I grew up with that. I know that's true. But it doesn't mean that there aren't certain times in my life where I feel the anxiety that comes from the fear of not being enough or not having enough. I don't know if you've ever asked or wondered, will I have enough time to get this done? Will I have enough strength to be able to do this? Will I have enough resources to be able to finish it? Will I have enough energy? Will I have enough health? Will I have enough wisdom? Will I have enough money to be able to do that? Will I have enough? It's a question we all ask. And I've spent all week trying to think of a way of illustrating this without getting too focused on money and economics, without just giving you another food story. And then yesterday I took my Emily to Woolworths for the Ushies swap meet. And God gave me the gift of a great story. Ushies are the free things you get from Woolies if you spend more than $30, right? Meant to be for children. A crowd, I would call a horde of 40 to 50, mostly adults, were fighting over these free little toys. Deals were being made. I was just laughing. My Em doesn't think much of her dad's reputation, clearly, because she said, "Dad, can you just stand there and hold the box open for me?" So in the middle of Miliara shops out the front of Woolies, where there's all these people, I'm standing there like a fool with my Ushies box wide open, and people just coming up and picking and choosing. And then, Emily made a deal with one lady, I say lady, a mature adult, and then another lady reached over the top of her with a whole bag of them and said, "I'll swap you this for that." Everyone who hates consumerism and spending money on stupid little things is going to hate this story. But it's a pretty simple example of what scarcity does to people. There were people there who clearly spend in $30 increments often, with huge bags of these little toys. And I'm walking home with Em, and I could not stop laughing. She didn't realise quite how funny I thought it was, but I just thought, these are adults. We're in the Miliara shops, and a wife. Incidentally, a few people who I haven't seen for a while at church were like, "Oh, Pastor Adam, it's great to see you." So shout out to them. But grown adults, one lady is with my Em, and she's yelling to her husband who's in Woolies, and she's going, "John, I've got Jessie." These are adults, and this is what happens to people when there's a fear of missing out or a passion for something. Who knows? But we are people who fight over things sometimes, and scarcity is a thing. And so when we have a fear of not having enough, I would actually push it further and say the greater fear is that we would not be enough. This is the wrestle I have. I take a bit for granted that God will provide. Throughout my life, I've not, I don't drive a Ferrari, but, and look, if you do, that's fine. But I haven't often stressed, I worry about money. Anna would know this at home. Claire would know this with the church finances. I worry about money in some ways, but never really had a fear around it. But I do ask those questions. Am I strong enough for this? Am I capable enough for this? Am I wise enough for this? Do you ask those questions too? Because we're going to read two stories that are really famous stories that are really important because they teach us that the fear of not being enough is bolted to this fear of being forgotten, feeling unsafe about our future, and kind of fuels a need to control when that fear takes hold. It's never good to just want to control all the people in your life and everything in your life. And you know why it's not good? Because you actually can't do it. They don't want to be controlled, and you can't control them. And there's nothing you can do to ensure provision for the rest of your life, because we're not just talking about money, we're talking about all the things that we might need. And abundance is stressful as well, because you've got to maintain what you have. You've got to protect what you have. It can create the illusion of self-sufficiency. And there's all sorts of comparison that takes place in church world, isn't there? It happens. So God being enough, God being our provider, yes, Jehovah Jireh, we can all sing it and we all know where to clap, right? If you grew up with me, we all sung it. Bar it is a strong word, Meg, but I did say you can't do the song. So that's a fair call. All right, I want to read to you from Genesis 22. Sometime later, God tested Abraham. He said to him, "Abraham, here I am," Abraham replied. Then God said, "Take your son, your only son whom you love, Isaac, and go to the region of Moriah. Sacrifice him there as a burnt offering on a mountain I will show you." Early the next morning, Abraham got up and loaded his donkey. He took with him 2 of his servants and his son Isaac. When he had cut enough wood for the burnt offering, he set out for the place God had told him about. On the 3rd day, Abraham looked up and saw the place in the distance. He said to his servants, "Stay here with the donkey while I and the boy go over there. We will worship and then we will come back to you." Does everyone know this story? Abraham took the wood for the burnt offering, placed it on his son Isaac, and he himself carried the fire and the knife. As the 2 of them went on together, Isaac spoke up and said to his father Abraham, "Father." "Yes, my son," Abraham replied. "The fire and wood are here." Isaac said, "But where is the lamb for the burnt offering?" Abraham answered, "God himself will provide the lamb for the burnt offering, my son." And the 2 of them went on together. When they reached the place God had told him about, Abraham built an altar there and arranged the wood on it. He bound his son Isaac and laid him on the altar on the top of the wood. Then he reached out his hand, took the knife to slay his son, but the angel of the Lord called out to him from heaven, "Abraham, Abraham!" "Here I am," he replied. The angel of the Lord said, "Do not lay a hand on the boy," he said. "Do not do anything to him. Now I know that you fear God because you have not withheld from me your son, your only son." Abraham looked up, and there in the thicket he saw a ram caught by its horns. He went over and took the ram and sacrificed it as a burnt offering instead of his son. So Abraham called that place, "The Lord will provide." And to this day it is said, "On the mountain of the Lord it will be provided." And Isaac called that place, "The place where my dad lost his mind." That's a joke. Those of you who get worried about Bible jokes, I was just kidding. A way of understanding Bible stories, if you're not familiar, especially with Old Testament ones, pick a character and be the character in the story. If I'm Abraham, there are people in my life who I love dearly. I read that story, and it's a hard one to read. And it's really important to just honour that feeling within you. Now think of the thing you love the most. It could be a child, but it could also be a pet. It could be someone else in your family. It could be your best friend. It could be something to which you feel a very strong emotional connection. This is a test. And this whole idea of God providing provision is usually a test from God, is a test for Abraham of what matters the most to him. I'll be honest with you, if I'm Abraham in that story, I probably fail dismally. I just would, I'll be honest with you. But in this story, Abraham, he's a legend of our faith. He doesn't. And there's so much within it, which I have some atheist friends who read it and go, who would want to follow a God who asks someone to do that? It's really important to understand that this was a story. God communicates truth through story, and these stories, we believe, happened. But the truth that's communicated here is the beginnings of teaching about atonement. It's the teachings about God himself taking the place or taking responsibility for what otherwise a human being would have experienced. It's a hard story to read. If you would call yourself new in the faith, you will hear us sing about this kind of story, talk about this kind of story, and it sits right at the beginnings of what we shared at communion. But nevertheless, it's a test, isn't it? And isn't that whole notion of what we have and who we are and scarcity sometimes a test. Like, it's one thing to say God will provide while we're cruising along through life, able to make ends meet. It's one thing to be able to cruise through life in our comfort zone, whilst not grieving, feeling anxiety, or struggling with our mental health. It's one thing to say God will provide while you actually don't need God to provide because you've managed to make life sufficiently limited to actually be lived within your own capacity. But here, a test comes. This is where the name of God comes. It's actually a name Abraham gives to the place, but the place is the Lord will provide. Jehovah Jireh. God sees our needs and supplies what is needed. Second story. It's pretty famous. Marcus alluded to it before. The Israelite community spent many, many years, 40, wandering the desert. And this story from Exodus chapter 16 tells some of that story. The whole Israelite community set out from Elim and came to the desert of Sin, which is between Elim and Sinai, on the 15th day of the second month after they had come out of Egypt. In the desert, the whole community grumbled against Moses and Aaron. The Israelites said to them, "If only we had died by the Lord's hand in Egypt. There we sat around pots of meat and ate all the food we wanted, but you have brought us out into the desert to starve the entire assembly to death." Doesn't scarcity make us think things that are a bit silly? Like, these are people who God has just led through and protected and saved. These are people who Moses and Aaron have been amazing leaders of. These are people who God has been before and behind, but an empty stomach, a lack of a sense of direction, causes them to become a pack of whingers. But more than that, to believe things are true that aren't. Scarcity will do that to you. The Lord said to Moses, "I will rain down bread from heaven for you. The people are to go out each day and gather enough for that day. In this way, I will test them." There's that word again. Jehovah Jireh, God will provide, and God seems to test around sufficiency. Not just thinking about money, not just thinking about food, but any time we feel, will we have enough? Will I be enough? It might be a test. God tests. The devil tempts. God tests us so we gain strength, so we gain clarity, so our faith and our vision grow. So the Lord said he'd rain down bread from heaven. The people had to go out each day and gather enough for that day. He'll test them on the sixth day. They had to prepare what they bring in, and that is to be twice as much as they gather on the other days. So Moses and Aaron said to the Israelites, "This is what's going to happen, and this is what you need to do." Picking up at verse 9, Moses told Aaron, "Say to the entire Israelite community, 'Come before the Lord, for he has heard your grumbling.'" He has heard your grumbling. You know, another name for God is the God who hears. Now, grumbling just sounds negative, doesn't it? It's what whingers do, and we kind of look at it negatively. But if we understand within that if we're in their shoes, we're probably grumbling too, right? Like, if you've got a job for which you don't have time, we whinge about it. We grumble, we complain, this is too much. If we feel a fundamental sense of inadequacy about our work life, it might be resources and money where you just feel like you're out on the edge, you know, and at any minute now, Jesus, could you come through? We'd love that. We all kind of sit in that place. And isn't it significant to know that whilst how we respond to scarcity is a test, God hears the anxiety of our hearts as well. God listens to his people lament, grumble, and complain. We should never feel entitled to that, but we should always feel grateful for that. That God hears our hearts. God hears our grief. God hears us grumble. Even in those experiences where we're saying, "God, you said you'd be enough, but I'm not exactly sensing the Jehovah Jireh-ness coming through. I don't feel like singing the song right now." God hears us grumble. God hears our hearts. God knows what is anxious within us. The story goes on. We'll pick it up. at verse 17. The Israelites did as they were told. Some gathered much and some little. When they had measured it by the omer, the one who had gathered much did not have too much, and the one who gathered little did not have too little. Everyone gathered just as much as they needed. Rochelle, could you just put up the slide that has at the top abundance, in the middle enough, and then underneath that scarcity? Then Moses said to them, "No one is to keep any of it until the morning." However, some of them paid no attention to Moses. They kept part of it until morning. That's that fear again, isn't it? Will God actually come again tomorrow? Now, just ponder this. This happened. We're going to read how long that happened for. Through his provision, God teaches trust and dependence. They didn't get to store away 10% of what they had. Their employer didn't store away some of that for them so that they were looked after in retirement. There was no tax system which looked after everyone in society. God just rained down this food every day, enough for everyone. In fact, if you tried to keep it, this is what happened. Some of them paid no attention to Moses and kept some of it till the morning, but it was full of maggots and began to smell. So Moses was angry with them. Every morning, everyone gathered as much as they needed, and when the sun grew hot, it melted away. The Sabbath bit that God talked about worked. And it goes on that this was a way that God provided for 40 years. The Israelites ate manna 40 years until they came to a land that was settled. They ate manna until they reached the border of Canaan. So, if you're the one who cooks in your household and people are upset about the lack of variety, 40 times 365.25 or whatever it is, it's a lot of manna, isn't it? Like, I just find that funny. That's a lot of the same. Adam, seeing it funny as an aside, sometimes the scarcity isn't actually scarcity. It's actually greed in disguise. Greed wears disguises, so does jealousy. And jealousy puts on this outfit that makes it look like fear, that makes it look valid. When the truth is, we're just hoarding and keeping because we're as scared as everybody else. We are people who believe that following Jesus and impacting the world is the calling on our lives. That's what we're doing as a church. That's why we have a ministry like the People's Pantry, but it's why we invest in different generations and in different people in different ways. But we are people who still feel this tension, who wrestle with greed, who struggle with fear, but in the middle, hope for that beautiful word that we talk about in church world, contentment. Because to be content is to feel at peace. It's for the boat to not be rocking. The thing about contentment is, if you do a word study of it in the Bible, you'll find it used in contexts of high anxiety and of, low safety, but you'll also find it talked about in the ordinary parts of life. It's like this goal for all human beings, especially those who know God, to be able to be aware of not needing too much, which is greed, and to not live with the fear of not having or being enough, and to just be able to sit in the middle and feel a sense of peace. Jehovah Jireh, God is our provider. These stories are famous stories of our faith going back millennia, and there are many others that we could have used. Jesus talked about it a lot. The letters talk about money a lot. It's always this sense of God will provide. These are two that show us that sometimes God tests us around provision, reminds us that we do feel a sense of anxiety around it. We do ask that question, am I going to be enough? And God hears that grumble. He listens to it and responds to it. And our humanity is known and named in the Bible. But Christians are to respond in a different way when we know this true. What does contentment look like? Well, I think it looks like trust. I think it looks like honour. And I think it looks like sacrifice. When I read this story, we're not told that, as explicitly as I would like, but when you reread it, you realise it's always there, that Abraham steps forward into this story And we read back on that, or I read back on it, and my assumption is he knew that God would come through in the end. And this has been my experience in so many ways, that where God guides, he will provide. But it's that classic story of until you actually step into what God has called you to do, it's not always there first. Right? Am I the only one who has this experience? God provides after he has led you. There's a need to step out in faith. And sure, it's meant that sometimes you've stepped out and then realised, yeah, maybe I got that wrong. That's because I got that wrong, not God. But there's a trust we can have that God will provide that runs so much deeper than we might tap into than we do. I think a really specific thing about trust, and we're doing as a church this discerning together. And I'm just seeing some great responses from people, really helpful. I'm grateful to everyone who's done it, and if you haven't yet, I'd love you to prayerfully participate in this. That's the goal. Someone wrote in their response this week words to this effect, that how important it is that what we hear in church needs to impact who we are outside of church. That's right in the DNA of who we are at Essendon, followers of Jesus impacting the world. And so I've thought about, what does it mean to talk about trust to a bunch of people who already get it? Like, how does our trust in God as provider say anything good to the people in our life who at times are as scared as we are about whether we will have enough, be enough, or whether or not God will come through? And part of it is I feel challenged when I hear about supply chains that aren't as healthy as they might be, when I see prices rising and I hear about cost of living and all of this going up, and this would be a challenge for anyone of any age. There's this challenge for us to talk about it all the time, right? Oh, I can't believe I paid $6.20 for a coffee. What's the world coming to? It just becomes what we talk about and what we feel. Maybe for those of us who know Jehovah Jireh, our provider, maybe we can be the least anxious presence in our household, in our workplace, in our team, where we do life. Because we believe that the supply chains aren't in just the hands of powerful people in the world. We believe in more than an economic system or political leaders. We believe in a God who reigns. I'm not saying we're banned from feeling anxious, but I'm wondering if in contexts where we're living our life amongst people who know Jesus, I'm wondering if there's power in being the least anxious person in the room. I know as a sports chaplain, when it's selection time and I happen to be there, I am the least anxious person in the room because I'm not going to get dropped. And it's noticeable, I think, within me to feel that. But I'm challenged, do I feel that when I'm in an environment where the conversation might be a bit different or something else? So our trust needs to not just be what we sing about here and pray about on our own and sit around as Christians and go, Jehovah Jireh. We don't do that. What we do is when we're not here, we, in the strength of God, try to be the least anxious presence in that place, in that conversation. Because then maybe in our actions, we say something about God as our provider. Been thinking about honour as well. We used the word stewardship as well, but when I think about a gift, like to honour a gift isn't just to look after it well, it's to appreciate it. I think it is really important to note God's provision. I think if you're in a small group environment, a Bible study group, a grow group or a life group, if you have Christian friends who you have conversations with, we can be so shy about bragging about some of this. Now, there's a difference between bragging about God providing you with an amazing holiday. Yeah, I vicariously holiday through some of you, and that's all right. I'm not talking about that kind of bragging, and I'm not talking about bragging about how much wealth we have. You can go do that with whoever you like. But I'm talking about, let's not be shy about bragging about how God has provided some of that other stuff for us. I've got to tell you, the thing, Anna and I visited some of our folks, a bunch of them last Sunday who were not well. Funniest part of the thing, just as an aside, I know I'm running out of time. I got in a lift with a vicar and a priest. True story. True story. The Baptist minister, a vicar and a priest got in a lift. Two of them were in a collar, one was in Air Jordans, and I was so proud. When you sit with someone whose life is going hard and you hear them speak about the faithfulness of God, how good is it? Make sure you do that too. Not when you're not well. Let's celebrate the goodness of God every day. Let's do it humbly. Let's not just brag about the stuff we've got. No one wants to actually hear that. But when you experience the sufficiency of God in a profound way, tell the story. Because there are so many people here in this room who are just wrestling with the sacrifice, who have been praying for stuff for ages and who are just beautifully sitting in that spot of saying, God, I still trust you even though there's all this scarcity. Honour the generosity of God by telling the story. Talk about the faithfulness of God. And lastly, sacrifice. This is a generous church. I don't need to talk about generosity here. But what I do need to say, because it's true for me, and if it's true for me, my hunch is that it's true for all of us. Generosity can be easy. Generosity is appreciated. Generosity is celebrated, and sometimes we give because of the return that comes. Let's not forget that the kind of generosity that's spoken about in the Bible is the sacrificial and costly kind. In times of scarcity, with damaged supply chains, conflict, war, high cost of living, I recognise that generosity is more costly. Part of being followers of Jesus who are impacting the world, though, might be to remember that we are people who trust in a God who doesn't just give us enough, but who is enough and who makes us enough by his grace to be the most sacrificially generous people in our home, where we work, and everywhere we do life. It's the sacrificial generosity of this church family that supports this church through its tithes and offerings. It's the sacrificial generosity of people that enables organisations like Tear Fund to act in the parts of the world into which we can't go. It's the sacrificial generosity of people who lead here in this church community, people who volunteer, people who serve in really visible ways and in invisible ways. That's what makes it work. That's what God uses. So when you think about how generous you are, think about how generous God is with you. And don't feel guilty. This isn't a pastor saying, feel bad about how much you have. I'm not saying that. I'm just saying that I have to let that hit my heart sufficiently, that my generosity isn't just about me feeling good about what I gave, but it is actually about the people to whom I'm giving and the God from whom I have received. And so we sacrifice, we give, we go above and beyond. In the Bible, God meets lots of material needs, but they always point to the deeper, greater need of all human beings, to know salvation and freedom in God. Romans 8:32 says, "He who did not spare his own son, but gave him up for us all, will he not also, along with him, graciously give us all things?" So don't go home and say, God, I really want that holiday. I really want their car and that house. I need this much money to feel comfortable. I really want that. I don't know if I need it. I can't justify it, but it's kind of cool. Don't go home and say that because of this Bible verse. Go home and say, God, I trust you enough to work hard to be the least anxious presence in my life as scarcity reigns. God, I'm grateful enough to honour you and tell the stories of your provision so that the faith of others is built. And I'm grateful enough to not give because it makes me look better or feel better, but to genuinely sacrifice because through his people, God is Jehovah Jireh to everybody else. Lord Jesus, we thank you for all that you provide for us. We are grateful people. And we pray that we might have your strength to trust you more than we even do now. God, to be the less worried people because we believe you reign over this world and our lives. God, teach us what it is to honour you. God, I've talked about people telling the stories of your faithfulness. But as Marcus led us so brilliantly before, God, I just pray for everyone who is in the gap, for whom scarcity is a reality right now, that question of, will I have enough? Will I be enough? Do I have enough strength? Do I have enough time? Remind us, you provide. And challenge us where we need to sacrifice. We live pretty comfortably here in Melbourne, God. We know it. And you call us to be good stewards of what we have. And as a part of that, God, we commit to being people who allow you to stretch us, to give where we might miss out, not just so that we gain. Who trust you as the one who has promised to provide for us. In the name of Jesus. Amen.